Hello, hello. Okay, we'll call the special meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order, joint with the Economic Development Subcommittee. The focus of and only agenda item on this meeting is to discuss the American Rescue Plan use of funds for business recovery. So I guess the best place to start is, I know the subcommittee has met a couple of times. Maybe let's talk about what your thoughts were, and then we can talk about the Board of Selectmen's thoughts and figure out if we can try to move something forward. Just when you use the mic, just make sure you talk into it, because so the people online can hear you as well.
Can you hear me? If I lean in close. All right, so I will just talk about the basic details of what we've come up with so far. So the EDC was requesting $100,000 to assist local businesses. These are just the basic guidelines that we've come up with. Businesses would have to submit a formal application. They'd have to demonstrate need by providing profit and loss statement for 2019 and 2020. Also a little dialogue and give a proposed use of the funds. We also, some of this comes from other towns and some of the state and federal programs, but they have to prove that they exhausted other avenues and grants available to them. Prove they were in business by 12/31/2020. The reason we came up with that date is because there are new businesses in town that didn't know how long the pandemic would last. So yes, they opened up after the pandemic started, but who knew how long it would last? So that's where we put that date in. Be a registered business in the town of North Stonington with a state tax ID number. The owner or officer of the business would be the one that has to submit the application. Funds suggested for each business selected would be from $1,000 to $10,000 max. So a minimum of 1,000 to 10,000. Detail the number of employees impacted both pre and post COVID. Applications would be submitted to EDC through a general email box that we would use. We have samples of confidentiality statements and other applicable legal notation. So basically stating to them that the information they provide to us is just for our purposes only, and it's not public information on regards to their profit and loss. Obviously, at the end, just like on the federal side, we would have to say who got what money, but we wouldn't have to provide that information. We were looking to do this and then advertise it in the quarterly when it was ready to go, and actually put some feet on the ground to go into the businesses and get the word out so people would know about it. We would also, it would come in on a rolling basis and basically, just like the federal funds, be first come, first serve, until we exhausted the amount we had in there. And then if we had a crazy amount of people, then we would come back for more. Mike, we talked about some of your proposals about base it on the tax revenue that they pay to the town, but that would really exclude most businesses in town, because most businesses only pay on their personal property unless they're the building owner. So anybody that leases, they're only paying on their equipment or what else might be in there. So then you're talking about a few $100s or $50 to a few thousand at most. So the only people that would benefit from that are actually property owners of the buildings. So it wouldn't help a small business who's leasing their property. So those are, so we did discuss some of your suggestions, and that was the one that it just didn't work in the scenario that we're looking at, because it wouldn't help uh, those businesses most affected. So that is the basic structure of what we're looking to do.
Okay, so can you talk about the use of the funds? Like, what are you envisioning? So the whole point of the funding is to help those businesses that are affected,
Yep.
adversely by this. What did you guys discuss the use of the funds being for the businesses?
So for needed infrastructure within that business, and also operational costs as well. So we wanted to put it in both uses, um, and really not structure it too much on, say, no, that's not allowed, but for them to give us a narrative on what they were using it for. I mean, we don't want people just saying, hey, we're going to decorate the inside. And I mean, one of the things that came out, we don't want them purchasing flowers just to put on the inside of on their tables or something like that. We want something that's going to be long term, and help them grow. But if they've suffered a big operational expenses without that revenue coming in, we want them to be able to use it for that. Um, but we did talk about some of the businesses that, look, they need help with their septic systems or things like that. So we want them to be able to use it for that. Do you get in that fine line of, okay, well, who's the property owner and who's the leaser? Yeah, that'll come. We also talked about it when it came to infrastructure, that it was for brick and mortar stores or brick and mortar locations. So we don't want a home business to come and say, hey, we want $5,000 based on this, because we're adding on to, I'm putting a home office in at my house. And that's where the operational side, they could use that for operational, but not for improvements on their home.
One of the things that I thought was, when you guys organized the meeting we had a couple of months ago with sector and economic the chamber, that, and I think everyone's who's in business is hearing the same story. Staff, like, no one can get staff, no one can get employ workers. It occurred to me that a good use of these funds would be to help give some level of a structured pay incentive to workers. I don't know if you guys talked about that, and if not, I have some thoughts about that as a potential program as well.
Yeah, we did talk about that, and we do know there's a need for that. So we actually even talked about a local EDC sponsored job board, whether it's on social media or what, that we have a job board. But you're right. I talked to some of the local restaurants that are struggling with that, and some of them had to pay some significant bonuses just to get people to show up. And if you pay attention, there's a few restaurants in Westerly that are closing because they can't find the work. Yeah. There's a prediction after Labor Day. I want to say it's a pretty decent percentage of business restaurants will close because of a labor shortage.
So, like, if we talk about, like, the biggest, I mean, I think that's the biggest need employers have right now, is workers. So, one of the things we were thinking about was, is there a way, well, there is a way, that we make some level of a grant available to employers for new staff, that they are able to, say, tack on an extra $2 or $3 an hour to an employee, and making they have to provide weekly reports that are valid, that we make sure the person stays employed. And so it's not like you're giving somebody something up front so they take it and leave or
Right.
whatever. But maybe that's something that would be helpful and immediately helpful, so that we don't see businesses potentially have to close. And you're right, I have heard about that in some other towns where you're actually seeing, I can't believe it, but actually seeing businesses closed. So I mean, to me, that's like the most urgent and pressing issue is from what, not just my opinion, but also what they said on that meeting you guys had. I seems like all the businesses said the same thing about workers.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea with with new staff, and I think um they do that a program like that for veterans that you have to keep reporting so much and you get a stipend based on that. So we probably can look into a process like that. But that's good because it's twofold. Not only is it helping employ people locally, hopefully, and that those people then stay and shop and do other things here in town. If they're not residents, they're people from the surrounding areas. But I think that's a great idea for coming up with a program like that.
I mean, I think Stonington was talking about partnering with like the chamber. So it's almost, and I don't know if this happened or not. But if it might even be something where if we were to reach out to a chamber and we literally tell them what we want to do with the money, maybe they can manage it for. Because again, part of all of this is that somebody has to manage this, and we are short staffed already, like everywhere else is. So who's going to do it? Um, so that to me is something I'd like to see us try to move forward on, and maybe reach out to like whether it's the Eastern Connecticut Chamber or the Ocean Community Chamber, one of the chambers, to see if they would want to. I don't know. Maybe they'd want to run a program like this for us based on what we're talking about.
So with this money in consideration of employment, I don't see it being an additional hourly rate, but just maybe a help with signing bonus. This is just a one-time shot that they're gonna get, right?
The only problem, yeah, I don't
But
disagree.
that's up to them if they want to pay them more. I don't know. I mean, it just,
The problem is though, if you give them a bonus up front, then they could just walk.
I get that, but
attached agreement to it. At the hospital, you have a sign-on bonus and you are agreeing to commit to one, to, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Recording online. Yeah, so I mean, I do worry that after you've given them a couple of dollars an hour more, when our money that we're giving them runs out, then where are they? So they would absolutely need to have some type of a commitment, or you pay it back if you're going to leave. I'm trying to wrap my head around how to get them more dollars an hour when the money eventually is going to run out that we're going to give them.
Right. That's concerning because they would get used to that amount of income and then.
And
No,
then-
I
yeah.
understand. Yeah, I understand that's a concern.
More of a management, the paperwork nightmare for the town or whoever to manage. But if we came up with a program like they either sign on bonus or was there for a certain amount of time, maybe they get a portion up front and then something after that. But when we talked about it, we didn't want it to be a paperwork nightmare for anybody in town. So something that's lingering for an extended period of time is then now you'd have to have someone manage it for an extended period of time. And then when we look at the $100,000, really that could go pretty quickly. If we had a lot of people that apply and you base it on, that's why we wanted to look at their P&Ls and also a little synopsis of what they're looking to do with it. So, you can,
I'm concerned too about the businesses wanting to give their P&Ls to the town. So they may just not want to do that, and it might make people not want to apply. So the more I'm thinking about it, I'm wondering about a partnership with, say, an organization that's not the town, that we are able to not have the paperwork nightmare, whatever the ideas we come up with. Is it a chamber or is it sector? Is it the council of governments? I don't really know who the entity could be, but we have the money of it. We have money available. We want to get it in the hands of the people that need it. So, I, the infrastructure and operations, I mean, I think if they demonstrate that they had a loss, then that's certainly justifiable, for that they have a need, and it's just having somebody analyze or, um, way that analyze the information, I think.
Yeah, I would be hesitant to give it to, have an outside agency do it for us. I think it's our funds, our, our responsibility, and it was pretty across the board on EDC that we would look at the applications as they came in, and do it as a board. Um, and I think it's something that we can manage. I would be hesitant to do it with an outside organization because they are managing things for other towns and other businesses, and it's just one less thing that we're doing in-house. But
I mean,
understand your point on the
yeah, I think,
P&Ls, but
I think a business owner is not going to want to, I don't know if business owners are going to be comfortable giving over their pay, all their most trusted documents to a board in a town. I don't think they will.
well, and we honestly, I got that information from some other towns that were doing it, and it's a basic P&L. We're not asking for tax returns. We're just asking for a basic P&L to show a difference between 2019, 2020. And one of the big things is we hope that businesses in town that are doing better, because there are businesses that are doing better, don't abuse it and try to come in for grant money that don't really need it. So we thought this was also puts a little skin in the game for the businesses that have to come forward and do something to get the money. But
Mike, I have a question.
Go ahead.
So in general, it seems like a great idea. I'd kind of off track. I'd like to do something for the individual taxpayers that would be similar on mortgage payments and rent payments, but that's another topic for another time. But as far as your idea, which is a good one, you're pretty clear on what the applicant has to do as far as bringing in the application, so on, but not so clear. Maybe you can clarify what you do as a board. Like, how does the approval process work? How many people are involved? Is there a subcommittee or not? Is there a vote that has to be taken? How many people have to approve? Does it have to be a unanimous vote or a majority vote? How does that going to work?
honestly, Bob, we haven't gotten that far with the approval process yet. We talked about doing it as a board, as a whole board, compared to just the subcommittee of the three of us that go through those applications. But like I said, they'd be as first come, first serve, because at the same time, we don't want to hold up money for people that might need it right now, because we talked about having a deadline, and we could still have a deadline, but I think we thought that it should be on a more first come, first serve and rolling basis. So we would review them, go over the information in the application. And that's still something that we need to work on, is that application. There are some towns that are trickling some out. So I do have some of that. I have the confidentiality statements that other places are using, but as far as the approval process, we haven't made it that far yet because we haven't talked to you guys yet. So we'd go back to the board and come up with that, but this is the preliminary of the basics of what we're looking to do with it and how it would work. Next would be, okay, what is the approval process? Is it a unanimous board decision, or is it, majority?
And I think, just my thought, on something like this, I think it should be a unanimous decision by the board and not just a majority. If there's people that have a reason not to, there's going to be a reason why. So
We also, I kind of envision a point system. So on the application, just to remove all partiality from any of the voting, and just apply a point system to the application. And then certainly we talked about having a paragraph that the owner, the president could demonstrate the need, what they wanted to do with it. That would, account for so many points. And I do agree with you. I think it should be unanimous. I think that we envision this being a short-lived thing. It's $100,000. We started off kind of talking about 5,000 a piece, 10,000 a piece, and then we thought, oh my God, 10,000 a piece, you're dealing with 10 businesses, and that's it, and then you're done with that money. So that's why we kind of went from 1,000 all the way up to 10, I think. I think we're expecting this to be, we're hoping that people are going to apply, and that there's going to be need out there, and we can just give it away and be done with it. And what they do with it after that, we also talked about, there's not going to be any going back and, making sure, oh, look at all that new, landscaping or whatever. at some point we have to trust and we're going to give the money and they're going to do what they say they're going to do with it.
So do you envision this program having an end? So when the end comes, if there's money left in the pot that was not given out, then it reverts
I
back?
think that we would definitely have to talk about that. We talked about doing such a big outreach. The last thing we want to do is end up having a business say, oh geez, I didn't even know that this existed, and miss out on it. So I think first and foremost, we have to go out there and do a really big public business type of an outreach to make sure that everybody knows that it's there and they can apply. But I guess if at the end of a certain amount of time that we put on it, there's still money left, and we can't find a business that would qualify, then I guess we would give that money back to the town to do what they wanted with whatever we had, the town had earmarked for the funds.
Thank you.
I think the $100,000 number was a number that was kind of come up with, I mean, I think there was some thought behind it, but certainly, could be changed higher or lower. I guess looking at grants between 1 and 10,000, my concern would be there should be some, and my point to looking at the tax rolls was not that that was necessarily a good indicator of how much somebody would get, but it was at least something to have some sort of a base on. So even if it was 500% of what your property tax was, at least there's something that's some sort of criteria. My concern would be that you have a small business that breaks even or is really, really a small business. And all of a sudden they've somehow gotten through the approval process for $10,000 and they really shouldn't be qualifying for that. So that was kind of my thought about, okay, what indicators can be used? Is it assessments? I understand that. Like I lease from somebody. So my personal property is all I have at my business. I don't own my building. I'm not sure that necessarily matters. It's like whatever the indicators are, there should be some indicators that we're following to have caps or criteria.
And that's partially for the profit and loss as well, to gauge the size of a business to a certain extent. So you wouldn't be giving the smallest business in town the 10,000 max. When we first started, we were at the $5,000 mark. And that's where the 100,000 came when I sat with Juliet and we went over the amount of businesses. And that's where the 100,000 came up, a rough number. And then during our meeting, it came out that, there's some businesses at 5,000, it wouldn't do anything for a business that's a decent size in our town,
Yeah.
that employs people in our town and that we want to help. So even 10,000 might not be enough for certain businesses, but yet we're a small town. We only have so many dollars. You have to put a cap on it. And that's where the minimum of the 1,000 came in. So if you're a small business, 1,000 might help you do something that you needed to do that you didn't have that extra for.
Christine, did you want to add something?
So because this is a federal grant, we need to know exactly what they do with the money. We are responsible for making sure that it is used specifically for COVID related projects or programs. So we need to make sure. So if it is something that the town itself is going to manage and not outsource to a chamber or another organization, we need to be very, very clear on what the money can be used for, so that it doesn't come back when we get audited, because we do have to submit quarterly and annual reports on how all the money is being used.
Bob, you had your hand up.
Yes, just because Brett just brought up a point. He said in passing, if it's a company that is incorporated and is in town or employs people from town, well, there's a distinction between those two. So it's going to be a company that's in North Stonington, not just someone that's employs people from North Stonington, correct? Okay, thank you.
So we have a few minutes left before we have to start our regular meeting. I feel like there's more work to be done on the infrastructure operational. I would like to try to really consider some sort of program to get bonuses in the hands of workers for North Stonington. And I feel like there's a way to do that using a chamber or some other entity, so the town doesn't have the responsibility of oversight of it or whatever. I think it would be good we could reach out to sector or a chamber to see, or even the cog, because they're actually hiring somebody that's going to help with oversight of this kind of stuff. I mean, I was more in line with like the hourly thing only because it kept somebody there, but I actually understand your points on why that's probably not maybe the right way to go. But I think that there's a huge problem even looming, as you just described earlier, like that we want to make sure we're not seeing businesses not be able to continue to sustain themselves because of loss of staff. And we could easily, allocate, $15,000 and start with, a program, with a partner organization, something like that, to get some money flowing to some of these, whether it's landscapers or hotels or whoever it is that's really hurting, having workers.
I, based on that, if that's something to move forward, I would lean more towards sector and try to talk to them a little more. The chambers are great, and I can always reach out to Jane with the Eastern. But they are also an organization that not everyone's a member of. So people might feel uncomfortable going through them. And then does that become a sales tactic for the chambers are great, don't get me wrong, but I don't want that to feel like now, hey, I'm working with the chamber, I'm getting this grant. Now I feel like I have to join. So I would think if that is something that you want to do, sector would probably be the most viable. They do that.
I agree with you. I think sector is the right entity. They're a nonprofit. They're the ones, and this is what they do really. I mean, they are a trusted source for businesses. They actually get financial information from businesses all the time. So they are the right entity. So yeah, I'm happy to reach out to sector and tell them about what we're thinking. And then, I mean, we're going to discuss this on our regular agenda at this next meeting. But this was really helpful, the work, and I know you guys are going to go back and do a little bit more, maybe based on this conversation. So let's revisit this again at our next meeting on the infrastructure operational side of things. And then meanwhile, I'll make a call to the director of sector to let him know what we're thinking. And we'll talk more in our meeting about if we want to do anything.
All right. So do you see this, just for the notes, as a separate program
You mean
from the business rescue plan that we're talking about? Do you think the employment is a separate program, or
I think it's
falls
still
under-
the same funds. Are you asking if I see that money coming out of the 100,000? Is that what you're
Yeah.
asking me?
Yep.
I don't necessarily think that. I think this is a really good use of this money. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that, in my opinion anyway, and I'm just one member of the board, but maybe we're spending 150, maybe we're spending 200. I mean, this is important. This is one of the most important things we can do with this money. So I'm not seeing it separate, and I'm not seeing a limit on the funds if we have a good reason for it.
Kind of hoping it'll work out that, that more and more people will utilize it. We might need to come back and get more.
Right.
If it's working,
Yeah, and
That's
just,
the hope,
as we
right?
said, we go through we'll go through our normal appropriation process anyway. So, the town has a voice, whether it's through the Board of Selectmen or through the Board of Finance, or depending on the amount, it goes through town meeting as well. So, with that, I'll adjourn, if we could, have a motion to adjourn this part of the meeting. Further discussion, all those in favor? Aye. Thank you, EDC subcommittee, for being here.
so listen.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks for the work.